All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna dive in, because now that we have quite a few coats down with our primer gun, as you can see here, and it's starting to dry, what we are gonna do is actually switch guns to a smaller tip size, and we are gonna start really laying on your very fine layers so that we can, like I said, get the flattest, smoothest finish possible and achieve the best result. So this is where I was telling you that we're gonna teach you how to actually reduce the paint. I'm gonna give you a quick tutorial now, and we'll teach you in other videos as well how you can like really nail it down to the kind of gun that you're spraying. But we're going to be spraying out of a DeVilbiss, a Tekna Pro Light, and with that we're using a 1.4 tip. So what we like to do is actually do an 8-to-1 ratio. Okay, so what that does is that's eight parts of your actual peel coat, which are decently thick. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to adjust this here where I can see this, and we're going to go to the first one here. Boom. All right, so we went to the 7. Now what you do, for those of you that don't know how to mix, what you do is you'll find your ratios on most cups. Get a cup that actually has the ratios built into it. Makes the job a lot more clean as well as very accurate. And what we did here is we matched it. So for example, on the 8-to-1 column, we actually went to the 7. We're gonna get a full cup out of our gun. And the reason we're doing that is because we can actually get multiple coats out of that, so that this will be kind of our finished final product here. So what you do is you'll go to the first 7 on the 8-to-1 ratio. Then what you'll do is set the cup down and go to the second matching number. So if you go to 7 on the first column, you will then match that to the next 7 on the same 8-to-1 ratio. What that's going to do is give you 8 parts of base to 1 part reducer. Okay, so what that's done is it's thinned it down pretty good. And it's a lot more runny, it's a lot more consistent. If you want to add a little more, you can add a little bit more. If you want to do like a 10% ratio, that's fine. Honestly, we've been painting for so long that we pretty much just mix it to the consistency of what we like. We can really kind of just see it, mix it, and kind of say that's it. If we want to add a little bit more reducer, we can do so. This is very runny, very consistent, but like I said, if I want to add a touch more reducer, just a little bit more, maybe about an ounce more, we can do that as well. And that's going to give us a really nice, good, liquidy consistency. What that's also going to do is it's going to cause the paint to stay wet a little bit longer on the panel. That's good. What happens is if you can get it, to stay wet, like for example on this one, this will be our 5th coat. We're not so far built up on our coats now, so what we can actually do is re-liquefy any rough spots that are already on here by having a little bit more reducer. Oh, and just so you know, the reducer that we use for our paint is xylene, okay? It's very important to use a matching reducer just to keep it from doing things like fogging or looking weird. Blacks especially, those can be the worst. We've actually had that happen, in the past, using other products and then using a different reducer, still in the same family of reducers, not like a urethane reducer, but a lacquer reducer. And what happened is it caused like fogging or making it look gray when we didn't want to, causing weird spots. It's always good with any paint to match the reducer of what they use. If they use naphtha, use naphtha to reduce it. If they use xylene, use xylene. But like I said, we're down to the right consistency. We're getting ready as this dries. We've probably got about another 15 minutes for that one. We're going to start laying on nice, pure, wet sheets. Now the good news about it being reduced as well, is just to let you know, is that you don't have to try so hard to keep it wet. So I would not go on with this, what I've done here in this mixture, and just cake it on and just like coat it heavy. It will run. Don't be fearful of runs. That's not the problem. If you get fearful of runs, here's what I like to do. Dial the fluid back to almost off. Just go slightly above and start on your first you know, like your first fender, or you start on the hood, or start on the trunk lid. Start somewhere where there's a nice spot, just a nice condensed spot, and then start spraying. And what that's going to do is you're going to be able to read and gauge it. If it's still coming out semi-dry, turn up the fluid nozzle a little bit. But I'll tell you right now, if you reduce it at an 8-to-1 or even a 10% ratio, you have more than enough to do the job and do it correctly. Actually, 8-to-1 is actually at more than 10% reduced. So 10% and farther, like I said, you really need to watch it when you're putting it on. Don't be fearful. That's the worst thing you can do, is be fearful, because then you're going to put it on too light. You're not going to get the peelability. What you really want to do is just watch it. Have good lighting, be able to see what's going on, okay? We're getting ready to dive into the project. We're going to let this finish drying, and then we're going to hop in with our Tekna and start putting on our smoothing layers. I just want to let you know the setup here. I got a 1.4 tip in my Tekna Pro Light. I actually have this out at about 2.5 fluid turns. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dive in and start hitting this. Now you can be, I wouldn't really say more aggressive as you spray, but now you really want to start laying on as if you were, you know, like an automotive painter. You really want to start like sheeting out the panels and such, and using it in more of a professional style. Remember this, now that we've reduced it though, it is going to lay on a lot smoother and a lot more consistent. So with that being said, what do you need to be careful for? Don't be fearful when spraying, but you do want to take caution with spraying with reduced paint. The paint, now that it has been reduced, is going to stay wet a lot longer, so just take a little bit of caution as you go through. That's why lighting really helps, one. And two, you really want to just go through and make sure that you are just putting on enough to wet it out. Now, how do you wet out a panel properly when using reduced paint? You don't just like wet the sheet out. You want to get it at about 85% wet out, and then as the dots kind of lay, as the specks hit and lay, they'll all connect, okay? So we're going to dive into the project. We're going to start painting. Here we go. All right guys, so now we've hit this with our first coat using the reduced paint. And I'll tell you right now, it looks very flat, looks very smooth. Now with the first coat, what I did was I came out 2.5 fluid turns. Now, clearly I will increase that as I put on coat by coat, but anytime you're switching new guns, I don't care if you've used that gun 1,000,000 times or not, you should always start off with a fairly lower setting. I hit it at about 28 PSI. I want good automation out of that gun. I want a flat finish. But I came out 2.5 fluid turns. I know that I need to come out about 1 more fluid turn to about 3.5 full turns, so I can put plenty of product on there. But like I said, I always start off low. Here's the thing, when you go on too heavy, or you don't set the panel up correctly or your gun up correctly to shoot correctly onto the panel, here's the problem. You really sometimes can't take back what you did if you make a big mistake. It's always doable to fix rough. It is not doable to fix many runs in base coat. I mean, you're either sanding it smooth, depending on the severity of the run, or what some painters do is you got to start over, and that's never fun. So always be safe. I would rather turn up my gun on the second coat than go on too heavy on the first coat and cause problems. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, this is a flat panel. You're painting a hood on a flat surface. You shouldn't get runs. That's absolutely true. But at the same time, you should practice how you paint. It doesn't matter if it's flat like this or on a door that's on a vehicle. It doesn't matter. If you practice one way, you will get as close to perfect as possible. If you're using multiple techniques on a single vehicle, you never really find that sweet spot of what's right and what's perfect. Another thing that's great too is, like, for example, say I go on at 2.5 turns on my hood and say it's slightly light. This is a flat surface, that's correct. But if I'm going on a door that's more susceptible to running because gravity is pulling it down to the ground, guess what? That 2.5 fluid turns might be exactly where I need it to be. So you also have to think about the different angles of the panels. You have a flat panel. Yeah, you can clearly go on heavier. But on a panel that runs up and down, it's a little bit different story. You have to be safe. So always err on the side of caution. And like I said, the reason I say that is because I know that you are investing money in painting your car, even though it's very affordable. We'll talk about pricing later in the video, but it's very affordable, but you're spending money. Anytime you spend money on our product, we take it very seriously. We want you to have a good experience. So with that being said, the panel is almost dry. We're gonna dive into the next coat. I'm gonna come out one more fluid turn from 2.5 to 3.5 full fluid turns out. So we'll wait till it dries. We'll dive into the next video. All right, guys, so we're down to the final coat using the Tecna. Everything has gone on perfectly smooth. Everything looks great. There's zero orange peel. It's ready for clear coat. One little step that I like to do, especially when I'm doing a permanent paint job, and you are able to do this with our paint. This is what's crazy. This doesn't matter if it's peelable or if you do a permanent coating. If I was doing a peelable coating, after I had done my 3rd gallon, all the way up to about 3.5 gallons, when I'm putting on like the final half gallon, which should give me about 2 coats, I'll take 2,000 grit sandpaper, and what I'll do with that 2,000 grit sandpaper is I'll just smooth out the panel. Get it ultra smooth, denib it. We have our tack cloths anyway, so that's what we're gonna do. Right now, all I'm doing is denibbing the panel. All right, now that I've sanded it and denibbed it, now I'm gonna hit it with the tack cloth. Now some of you might think, wait a minute, if you can sand it, then how is it still peelable? Well, it's very simple. If you put on a really flat and smooth finish, the sandpaper should just glide over the top. If your finish is extremely rough and just, to be honest with you, not that great of a coats that you've been putting on, it's not very smooth, I mean, it's gonna be rough, but the great news is that once you put on about 3 gallons, it doesn't matter. You can be a lot more rough with it if you've given it enough time to dry. What I mean about enough time to dry was, before I started sanding this, it sat for about 25 minutes. It is fully dry. I can absolutely sand it if I sand it with 2,000 grit. I'm not telling you to take, 400 grit sandpaper and just attack it like, it kicked your dog. I'm saying be smart about it. 2,000 grit sandpaper, I mean, that's very non-abrasive, but it is enough to denib the panel. So now we're gonna tack cloth. Now, if you'll notice on this tack clothing I'm doing right now, what I'm doing is I'm actually pushing all the way to the ends of the panel. You're doing that for a reason. What you're trying to do is anything that's sitting on the panel, don't just rely on the cloth to pick it up. What you want to do is actually push it to the end of the panel so that anything that's sitting on the ends of it that's actually not getting collected, you're actually making it fall off the panel, okay? So, looks great. One little misconception I want to hit on real fast for people that aren't painters is this. Once you sand it, so like say it's black, so I'm sanding the base coat, and say it gets a white scuffy look to it and it kind of looks just a little scratchy, right? It's sanded. The big misconception is, well, if I clear coat over this right now, won't it look weird? Absolutely not. If you sanded this spot right here on black, it made it look kind of chalky a little bit and then tacked it off and it still looked, kind of matte looking, very, very, very matte looking. And then say you did not do it here, it doesn't matter. The clear coat is going to bring out the depth of the black, or any color for that matter, and turn it that color. If you've ever seen somebody actually paint a car, like on YouTube, for example, like a professional painter, my favorite, I love watching The Gunman. I follow his channel, he's fantastic. But a lot of the times when he's blending panels in a video, what he'll do is he'll actually sand the spot. It's got primer on it, it's different colors. What he'll do is the spot that he's not hitting will still get sanded and then re-cleared. They're blending the panels. So it will all get blended in the end. You don't have to even hit this with another layer of black. If you have the black, it's a great idea. I'm gonna hit it with another layer of black. But then after that, I'm finally ready for clear coat. But right now, I'm gonna put on a nice dust coat of black just to blend it all together. And then we're gonna put on some clear and get this thing looking like a mirror finish. So let's dive in, let's put on our last coat of black so we can clear this thing. One quick thing I wanna point out real fast to you guys is this. Remember, I'm just blending this panel right now. I don't wanna put on such a thick coat that I could create any orange peel now because I've sanded it. So what I'm doing is I'm gonna put on just enough of a dust coat to get full coverage on the panel, but not cause any orange peel. Remember, your clear coat, if you put it on thick enough, yeah, it can make some corrections, but clear coat is not there to change the look of the orange peel from underneath. If you have a lot of orange peel on your base coat, you're gonna have a lot of orange peel on your clear coat. Make your base smooth. So right now, the worst thing I could do is cake on my base coat. What it's gonna do is create a wavy appearance, and then the clear coat's gonna look wavy. If I just dust it on and make it all black and look good, and then tack off whatever is left on the surface, and then clear coat it, I'm gonna get a mirror finish. I'll show you guys in the end. You guys are gonna think it's absolutely amazing. Let's dive in, let's keep going. Okay, I know it's a little foggy in here for a second, but one thing I want to hit on real fast before I forget, really quickly, is the fact of overlap. Overlap is one thing I haven't really talked about in the video yet, but I really want to hit on it because everyone has their own opinion on overlap. I have my own opinion on overlap. You always hear the 50-50 overlap. Well, here's why I don't like the 50-50 overlap. I do more of a 65 to 70% overlap, which means that at a pass like this, I'm only dropping down about 30 to 35% down so that I get a majority of my second pass is still hitting over what I just did. The reason I do that is because the common rule is 50% overlap. Well, here's the problem, nobody's perfect. If you're doing it at exactly 50% overlap and you make a boo-boo, then you might be at 35 to 40% overlap on one of your passes. That leaves you pretty big opportunity for some dry spots. I never like to set my benchmark at the worst scenario. So instead, if I have my overlap at 65 to 70%, where I'm barely coming down and then overlapping, what that does is it gives me a less opportunity for mistake. And a lot of painters nowadays, they use that method anyway. They do a 60 to 70, somewhere in that range that feels good to them, overlap. The 50-50 overlap, I mean, yeah, it's still kind of used, but like I said, if you overlap a 50%er, I mean, you're really leaving yourself an opportunity there where you drop too low to leave yourself a really beautiful tiger stripe, which is terrible in the painting world. You hate, tiger stripes are terrible. So to prevent that, how do you do it? Just increase your overlap a little bit. If you're normally a 50-50 overlap person, try a 60% overlap.